Okay, good morning and welcome. Can everyone hear me up in the back okay? Yeah? Okay, so in your notebooks as well, there are pages to take some notes. So I encourage you to practice some of the tips and strategies that were just mentioned in your notebook or in your workbook for this sample lecture. Because your leaders here we're going to be showing you, or they're going to be showing you on the dot cam what some of their notes might look like as they're taking them along with you, so that I can do some comparisons as well to see what some experienced post-secondary students' notes look like. Okay, so today's, this is a lecture taken from AHS 107. We're just going to get into, well, who I am. First of all, you might have already made the comparison or the connection to Deadpool. I had students come to me a few years ago and be like, do you read comic books? I was like, no. They're like, you should. And they sent me, or pointed me in the direction of this Marvel anti-hero, Deadpool. I haven't seen the second movie yet. Who's seen the second movie? Is it better than the first? Oh, I've heard varying results, varying opinions. So should I hold back my expectations of it so I don't get, no, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I did my PhD here in Recreation and Leisure Studies, and I've been a sessional lecturer and indefinite term lecturer here since about 2013. I did my master's at the University of Windsor in sports psychology and my bachelor's in sports psychology at Laurentian in Sudbury. So all my background is sports psychology. And from that, I also have a part-time business where I work with athletes of various ages and skill levels to help improve their mental side of their game. So with core skills such as goal setting, imagery, self-talk, managing emotions, arousal and energy regulation, routines, those types of things. So that's what I do on the part-time. My research interest, and it's tied to something we're going to talk about today, is looking at moral disengagement and deviance in the sport and recreation context. So why do athletes and people that participate in sports and competitive sports, why do they do bad things? Why do they break the rules? Why do they cheat? Why do they take performance-enhancing drugs? Those types of things. I find that aspect of sports and recreation very, very interesting, and sports and recreation, part of broader leisure, what we do in our spare time as well. A lot of research out there doesn't tend to look at the darker aspects of the things that we participate in. So we're going to talk a bit about that today as well. I'm a very proud dog owner. That there is my rescue greyhound. I've had her for 1.5 years. Her name is Willa, and it's been quite an interesting transition from a very well-behaved golden retriever that I had from a puppy up until he passed away, and then this crazy nutball here definitely keeps me on my toes. So definitely two very different personalities. So a little bit about me, and I hope to learn a lot about you guys when you start here in the fall. Again, any questions, any concerns, anything that you want to talk about, my email, my phone, my door is always open, so don't hesitate to come by, okay? All right, so AHS 107. Some of you may have heard some things from the last two offerings of this course, but this course is called the Sociology of Activity, Health, and Well-Being. And Leanne mentioned earlier that it is a required course for all first-year and transfer students in the faculty. This course meets our communication requirement and is based around conceptualization, contextualization, and comprehension, and why communication is important. So with this course, it's a lecture and a tutorial, but it's not a traditional lecture and tutorial format where when you go to your tutorial, it goes deeper into the concepts that were learned in lecture. In your tutorials, they're designed to practice and further develop your communication skills. So we have the Writing Center in the library designing tutorials. We have public speaking. We have little 2-minute theses. And your tutorials, don't freak out, are a maximum of 25 students. So you will get to know the people in your tutorials very, very well. And the tutorials are all based on participation, active participation and engagement. So we are practicing and further developing our communication skills. And it's also the sociology requirement for those of you in kin and those of you in the School of Public Health and Health Systems. Sorry, Rec and Leisure, you still have to take Sociology 101. And the importance of this course is we live, we work, we play, live, work, play. I think that's what's on the university kind of advertising, marketing. in the social context, right? Everywhere we go, everything we're going to do, we're going to be probably interacting with people, knowing or having to know how to effectively communicate and interact with people. Think, who wants to be a doctor? Optometrist, professional in some manner? Who are you going to work with? How are you going to figure out how you can help them? Yes, so we live and work and play in the social context. That's why this course, from a social lens, is very important. We're going to look at a number of topics: diverse groups, deviance, social class. We're going to touch on the main theories used in sociology and how we use those as models to understand the world we live and work in. So it's an extremely important aspect, and it's very interesting, and it continually evolves and continually changes. So that's just a little bit about the course and kind of what to expect, because I really want to manage your expectations about the course and what you're going to get out of the course. So the purpose for today's sample lecture is to provide you with an in-class experience, much like what you're going to be doing in the fall is what you're doing right now. Some of you will be in this room for section 1, well, or section 2 for the lecture, so we will be meeting here once a week. Provide some tips on how to prepare for lectures and how to take effective notes in class. So your leaders here and your volunteers here will be going through that with you. And how we can use the course content as a conduit, connection for communication in various ways, and building our communication skills. So I really enjoy this course. It's a lot of fun, a lot of interesting things that we talk about, and it sparks a lot of open discussion, opinions, thoughts, feelings. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. We're going to enjoy it. You're going to, hopefully, like Russ mentioned, the attitude towards your learning and taking responsibility for your learning will complement the interest in your courses, and you'll get the most out of them. Okay, so we're going to talk about deviance in leisure and also use a healthcare delivery example or context. But first, we need to be able to talk about our learning points. Forgot that slide was in there. So we want to understand the complexity of deviance, also the complexity of leisure. We're going to do this very quickly, very briefly, but it'll give us an idea. We want to be able to understand what constitutes tolerable and intolerable deviance. Understand activities viewed as marginal or deviant in our society, because much like leisure, deviance is also dependent on the person. Some people might not think certain behaviors are bad or amoral, where some people might. And it's interesting how all these views work together. And we're going to use the healthcare field as a context in which deviance happens. So, first of all, what is leisure? What do some of you guys do in your spare time? Okay, let's answer the question, yeah.
Outside of work, school, or sleep.
Okay, so anything that's done outside of work, school, or sleep. So anything outside of your must-do responsibilities. Okay, sure, that's involved in it. What else? Any other thoughts? What do you guys do in your spare time? What does your leisure look like? And why do you do it? Naps, okay. You'll be taking a lot of naps probably in your first term. What else? Any other thoughts? Yep.
Reading.
Reading, okay, sure. Yep. Music? Sports? Arts? Fortnite? Fortnite has led to injuries. We know this, right, Russ?
Injuries.
Yeah. Playing Fortnite for too long and then getting up and trying to do some physical activity. Pulling muscles. Yep. Okay, so leisure is incredibly varied. Sometimes it's, again, time spent outside of work or family responsibilities. It can be considered an activity, something we do, participate in. It can also be considered the experience itself. Being immersed, being in that flow state, being completely involved in what's going on around us, completely present in the moment. And really, it depends on the eye of the beholder. It depends on the person. What I might consider leisure, somebody else might consider work. And almost anything at any time may constitute leisure for someone. As you will read in this chapter that will be assigned this year, we will see how even completely amoral and evil behaviors can be considered leisure to someone. Serial killing could be considered a leisure activity because people that do it might enjoy it. So it varies completely on a huge spectrum. Like leisure, deviance is dependent on the person. So when we hear the word deviance, what do we think? Or deviant? Yeah. Something bad. Pardon me? A change? Okay. Yeah. Something outside of the data set? Okay. Yeah, stemming or stringing away from what society deems as normal. So deviant just means moving away from the institutional expectations that are shared as legitimate within our society. Okay? There's no one act or one behavior that is universally condemned by all societies. So keep that in mind as well. So I'm going to pull out my whiteboard markers here. Thinking about the societies in which we live, what is considered deviant behavior? Just shout them out. What's deviant in our society? Murder, okay. I'll put that in red. Murder, theft. Drinking and driving, yes. Assault, plagiarism, academic integrity. Assault. What else? Dope, yeah. Drugs. Yep. Well, alcoholism. Gambling, maybe. Well, to somebody, it could be a deviant behavior. What else? Various types and forms of sex, sure. Abuse? Pardon me? Sorry, I didn't hear that one. Oh yeah, children out of wedlock. Wedlock, and then there was abuse. Yeah. Pardon me? Human trafficking, yeah. Yeah, that seems to be on the rise as well. So yes, we're thinking about what is deviant in our society. And a lot of these are extreme ends, and we're going to see in a couple classification systems on how we determine what is worse than others, where these might fit. So this is the idea. Well, drugs, PEDs, in sports. Think of the sports context as well. Think of some of the contexts in which you do your leisure. Who streams illegally online? Downloads illegally. You're all being deviant. You're all breaking the law. Why do we do it? Why do you do it? Pardon me? It's a rise against capitalism. Okay, so you're trying to stick it to the man. All right.
We like to be bad.
We like to be bad. Yes, some deviance. It is enjoyable. Think you're pulling one over on somebody, getting something when nobody else has, those types of things. Yeah, just think about how you spend your leisure time and what that might look like to our broader society as well. And why we do these things also stems into the social cognitive construct of moral disengagement, where we justify our behaviors when we know they're bad. So again, sticking it to the man. Moral justification. Everyone else is doing it. It's a victimless crime, right? Diffusion, displacement of responsibility, those types of things. Okay, 2 forms of deviance that we can, look to understand and help us maybe classify a bit, but we all look at a couple other classification systems. We have the tolerable behaviors, where the threat to the community is perceived to be low. So recreational, what's happening on October 17th? Yeah. So maybe the deviance factor will be decreased a little bit, but recreational drug use, alcohol consumption is condoned within our societies. Some forms of sexual behavior. We have intolerable types of deviance. Behaviors in violation of powerful criminal and non-criminal norms. Theft, suicide, compulsive gambling. Again, some of these things might go up into the other category, some might fall into the other category. But these are generally two types or two forms of deviance. So it'd be important to know those two. And also, deviant behavior, deviant leisure, is called many things. In the leisure literature, it can be referred to as deviant, marginal, purple recreation, taboo recreation, questionable or problematic behaviors. But back to the point made earlier, people enjoy, to some extent, deviant behaviors. Sometimes it feels good to be a little bad, to go against the norms of society. So and I'm not here to paint all behaviors with a bad brush. There are some that are obviously way worse than others, but again, there's something in our psyche, something in our makeup that we enjoy deviance just a little bit. Maybe we're fascinated to push the limits and see what might happen. There's various ways we can try to explain that or understand that. Oh. Okay, I'm going to pass it back over to your senior students here, and we'll carry on with our lecture after this little break. Okay? You want me to turn on the dot cam?
I don't know what that means.
Oh, no. Not yet. Not yet. At the end. We'll do that at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we're back. Thank you for that, yes? So, if I can just grab your focus again at the front. So we're just going to talk a little bit about some things that you can be paying attention to during lecture, what we've been going through. So just some verbal cues would be the lecture outline, and this again, this was at the beginning, so we kind of went through like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about today. This is what we're going to do. Hypotheticals, so like examples, if you list any of those, which we kind of went through as a group. And then some key points or counter arguments, and then repetition and summary and recaps and conclusions. So did anyone notice when he said that there was going to be something important to know? So like a show of hands if you heard that. Yeah. Show of hands if you wrote that down. Okay. 10 points for whoever can tell me what it was that's important. Yeah, the two different types of deviance, tolerable and intolerable. So that's a great example of something that you might hear during a lecture of a professor kind of going through the notes, and especially for me when I see things written on the slides, so tolerable and intolerable were already written on the slides, so I wasn't necessarily writing down extra information, but then when I heard him say, you should know this is important, I just made an extra note on my page. So just things like that to kind of be aware of for verbal cues. And then for non-verbal cues would be facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, emphasis, repetition, slowing down, raising the voice. So did anyone notice anything that he maybe repeated a couple times? Does anyone want to share? Yeah, that the deviance is very contextual, so it depends on the person, depends on the society, and who agrees it. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share anything that they? That was kind of my main point that I took away too. Yeah. Sorry, say that one.
There's no one act that's condemned by all society.
Yeah, so that was mentioned a couple times too, that kind of similar to the context of it, that it really just depends on the society that you're in. And back to
We're back on? All right. All right, back again here. So, before the break, mentioned there was two kind of forms, right? Intolerable, tolerable. Now we're going to look at how we classify those forms of deviance. So, in the literature, there are a couple classification systems. They're fairly dated, but they still apply very well to what we're talking about today. So we have the Nash Pyramid and the Curtis scale. So again, hint, hint, it would be important to know these two classification systems. So we have the Nash Pyramid. This is looking at where we would put some of the behaviors that we engage in within our societies. So we kind of see the 1 minus 1 on this pyramid, and it is kind of classifying, say, substance abuse, vandalism. So we have at the very bottom, bottom of the pile, acts performed against society, broadly defined, or broadly stated. Then we have our injury to ourself, or detriment to ourself, and then we're moving up as we're getting slightly better. Entertainment, amusement, escape from monotony, killing time, fairly, kind of low, especially killing time. What are we doing while we're watching Netflix or reading? We're kind of just sitting there, taking it in. Maybe we're not analyzing it or critically thinking about too much. We're just sitting there, being present. Then we move up to, so watching television, perfect. Then we're moving up to emotional participation, so maybe we're watching a play or reading a book, and it's really hitting on our emotions. We're experiencing maybe joy and sadness and suspense and these types of things. So there's an emotional connection now. Then we move up to active participation, so this will be getting out, getting your body moving, participating, maybe running, if it's an individual yoga type thing, other types of recreational activities with friends, with family, those types of things. And then we move up to creative participation where we're actually making or creating something. So this is as the example, composing a poem, maybe doing a painting. Really, it ties in maybe the part of the physical, part of the emotional. Then there's also the enjoyment and the amusement, the escape from monotony, those types of things. So this is just one way that we can classify some of the behaviors or some of the acts that we see. So out of the things that we wrote down here, children out of wedlock, abuse, human trafficking, murder, theft, drinking and driving, alcoholism, academic integrity, assault, drugs, gambling, sex, where would you put that according to this classification system? Just pick one, and where might you put it? Yeah. Alcohol, -1. Okay. Could drinking be a +1? Could it go up into the next level? Could be casual time, could be amusement, entertainment, various.
Depends on how you see it, actually.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on how you see it or how your social group sees it, or maybe the broader society sees it as well. Anything else? Most of the other ones would probably be down near the bottom, right? I'm glad we can agree on that. Okay. Oops, maybe I'm too far away. The Curtis scale, similar, but I tend to like this one a little bit more. There's a neutral ground. And it's could be a sliding scale here. So we have everything from extremely positive and good, so we got complete benevolence, generosity, they say church singing, to extreme negative bad. So we have premeditated murder, torture, human trafficking, a lot of these things that we put up here. Now, to some people, some societies, some contexts, some of the things we have up here could slide down, maybe a bit more to neutral. War crimes against humanity. To us here, we would see that as extremely negatively bad, whereas in other parts of the world, it might not be as bad. It might be a necessity. It might not even be seen as deviance, something that just needs to be done. Maybe it's part of somebody's job or whatever. So again, when we're looking at what behaviors, what we're seeing in the media, what we're seeing in the news, what we're seeing in our own communities, we can start to, according to our own personal self, and also contrasting that or comparing that to the broader societal plane, where these things might fit, where do we align, where we classify certain behaviors. Okay? Any questions on the two classifications? Yeah. No, same scale. It was originally in 78, and then it was revised again in 88. Yeah, same scale, just some more research came out about it, more research used it, and got updated and revised it. Yes? Pardon me?
How can you define where something goes on the scale?
That's an excellent question. The question was, how do you define where something goes on the scale? Any takers? Yeah. So it could be where you are personally as these things are happening, right? So, yep, that could be it.
Does it also depend on like the perception of how you perceive it?
Yeah, how you perceive it, for sure. Cultural norms. Think about, yeah. The context. That's right. So, since October 17th, it's coming around and it's in the media and everything about that. 10 years ago, marijuana, recreational drug use, where would that be on this scale? According to our society, not personally, everyone's going to have their own personal opinions on that, but generally as a society, where would that go? Just, marijuana use. Not like, we're not talking about injections or anything like that, but drug use. Negative, so like -1, 2 perhaps? Where is it shifting to?
Like positive.
Bit more neutral, positive. It's becoming accepted, more accepted within our society. So there's a lot of things that will go into place. Or a lot of things, it's a complex, it's not quite a procedure, but there's a lot of factors at play that determine where things go on the scale. Now, we have our legal system, we have our political systems that kind of outline certain things, our Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, Constitution, those types of things that give us a general idea of what's good and what's bad within our societies and how we should behave accordingly. Yes?
I was actually going to ask, is there like any applications of this, like in the court of law, for example, like somebody uses to make a
Well, it can be, it's not so much used in the court of law, but there are a lot of things that come into play around the sentencing, the time, the cultural climate, the societal climate, lots of different types of things, because we're always evolving with certain things. New things are coming up, old things are kind of being pushed away a little bit or not deemed as important or as influential. So it can be argued, but it's not really in.
So would it just be used, like its application, would it just be in like specific context, or is there no like general application?
Specific context, but generally we can kind of see and use these to kind of get a sense of where our societies and where our cultures are at this moment in time and compare them across decades or across generations as well. Yeah.
Would something like this be amplified that they would remake information from?
Yeah, it could be, especially when we're talking about the individual on a personal level, these debates, philosophical debates perhaps. But as we move out of our personal self and into society, that's where we have our political institutions, our legal systems, these types of things, where there are some things that are pretty inherent here in our Western society. Murder, assault, drinking and driving, that might not be seen as bad in other cultures. Remember back, no one society condemns all behaviors, kind of like there's not one behavior that is condemned equally across all societies, kind of thing. So does that kind of answer your question? Does that answer it? Awesome. All right. So when we're thinking about our leisure, back to leisure, let's get out of the theft and abuse and murder talk and things like that, extremely bad behaviors. But when we're thinking about our leisure, there are several forms of leisure that can be questionable, right? Drugs, drinking. What else? Political ideas, sure. Yeah. So when you think about your leisure, some forms, several forms can be considered questionable. Many of the examples or many of the things that we're thinking about could probably be considered tolerable. They're not really affecting or impacting the greater community in a bad way in terms of personal safety, right? What people might do behind their own closed doors is their own business kind of thing. It's not hurting your neighbor. And people might tolerate certain activities even if they wouldn't participate in them. So there's some people that abstain from drinking. There's people that abstain from drug use. There are people that abstain from a lot of behaviors, but they don't make it their mission to go out and scold everybody about what's going on or what they're doing or to see the ill of their ways. So we tolerate a lot of things, even if we wouldn't participate in them. And we know that activities can shift from tolerable to intolerable depending on a few things. And this is some of the things we've already mentioned. And it was great that you guys are already thinking about these. Societal factors, political changes. Every time we have a new party comes into power, there's a few things that shift, right? Things that, well, we as communities and societies say we want to see change. That's why we voted that particular party into power. The perceived impact of the activity on members of society, like stunt driving and street racing. Extremely dangerous, especially to other motorists on the road. Drinking and driving. And also change in legal status of certain activities. And again, not to keep talking about marijuana, but we're seeing a change in legal status, a political change, a societal change with what's coming up later at the end of this year. So it's timely to use that as an example. So, some things when we're reviewing or when you're reviewing your notes to think about. We could talk about a couple of these right now too. I think we have some time. What do you consider leisure? Reflect on that. Where do we draw the line between tolerable and intolerable forms of deviance? Where would we individually, and then extrapolating that out to the larger community and society, where do we draw that line? Where's that line in the sand that says, oh, you've crossed it? Sure.
When it becomes a danger to yourself or society?
Okay, when it becomes a danger to yourself or society, would cliff jumping be considered tolerable or intolerable? Is it a danger to society? Is it a danger to yourself? I'm just using that as an example because it came off the top of my head with the two people in Shannon Falls in BC that had passed away. Engaging in their leisure activity. Yeah, the YouTubers. Yeah. How do we classify varying degrees of the same activity? Is it tolerable to go out and have a few drinks with your friends over dinner, but it's not okay to sit down and drink a case of beer to yourself and get blackout wasted? No, it's the same activity. Where do we draw the line on what's tolerable and intolerable based on the same activity that we're doing? You know, you think about it in sports too. Let's use a sports example. Somebody, two teams, opponents, somebody might do something wrong, slash, stick, whatever, hurt, injure an opponent. Is it tolerable because it is part of the game, or is it intolerable because somebody went above and beyond and there was intent to injure somebody? So how do we classify that? Where do we draw that line? That's why they're in sports, and I'm just referring back to a couple examples. They're a little older because I haven't seen too much of this, but when Marty McSorley slashed Donald Bashir in the head with his stick, that ended up being in the court of law. Defense is, well, you know, they play this game, they have this equipment, they have these sticks. How is it considered a weapon when it's part of the game? So things like that. This is where things get really, really murky. How do we pick and choose what we're going to use? Same with Todd Bertuzzi and Steve Moore. Or even in the World Cup, players flailing on the ground like they've been, hit by a truck. And they got their foot stepped on, but their ear is so sore. I didn't know there was a connection between your baby toe and your ear, but apparently there is. How do we classify, is that tolerable or intolerable in that sport context? These types of things. And lastly, and this is kind of an interesting question, why is marginal leisure important? Let's talk about this one. Why is I use marginal leisure as the terminology there, but deviant leisure, purple leisure. Why is marginal leisure important? What does it tell us? What information does it give us? You can say something.
I think it's important because one, like everyone's kind of different, like, and two, like as much as there's good and bad, right? Ultimately, like a mentor of mine told me that like there isn't really like something that's good or bad. Everyone's just human ultimately, right? So I feel like it's kind of important because we can't just be like monotonous and like just one tone. There needs to be like, if we're seeking balance, fine, like let's seek balance. It can't all be good. There's got to be some bad in it too.
Sure, yeah. It can't all be good and it can't all be bad. There's going to be some balance. There's going to be some. It kind of tells us, maybe what we might value in society as well, what we might value to do with our time. So it kind of gives us some insight into that as well. So that's a very, very good point. Yes.
It feels good to be bad.
Feels good to be bad. Sure, we can use that. We can bring that into the mix. What else? Yes. Helps us understand the incentives behind why we're engaging in these activities. So the return on investment kind of thing. Sure. Yep. Sorry, I'm gonna have to say that again.
So basically, it helps us like see the perspective of people to be able to classify like if it's tolerable or intolerable and decide what kind of context would it apply to on society.
So it gives us insight into what people consider tolerable and intolerable in our choices, and also what context is. That's why context is so very important in this debate type of thing. So it is important. It helps us kind of understand, like I said, what we value in society, what contexts, certain behaviors are tolerable or intolerable. Yes? Oh, very much so, yeah. The shifts, it shifts societal norms as we evolve and as we move forward as communities and societies, as individuals. And again, so why is it important? Why should we study it? All of these reasons that we've just mentioned here. It helps us understand where we personally situate ourselves in relation to that of our societal views, our community views, and provides us great information on how we can navigate and work within those different contexts. Right? All right. We're going to take this deviance concept. We're going to apply it in a healthcare delivery setting. This is very, very interesting stuff. Okay. When we're looking at a healthcare setting, so we're talking about a hospital, or maybe a personal support worker, or a developmental behavior specialist. Let's think about I'm just throwing out other types of roles and jobs that this could fall into, but we're going to look at a hospital setting today. So, lots of harm can come to the people that are under our care, especially think of nurses, doctors, surgeons, those types of roles. Harm can happen as a result of active errors, which are, hold on, I got to check my notes for this one. I can't remember everything all the time, but just so you guys know the distinct difference between active and latent errors. Active errors include things such as failing to check or record a finding, ordering the wrong drug, so this is in the hospital context, reading the wrong charts. So you come into a room, nurse comes into a room, you got two people, chart A, chart B. Maybe they look at chart B first and then go do something for person A and do what they should have been doing for person B. It happens. And latent errors are classified as flaws or weaknesses in a system's defense. So protocols. So flaws or weaknesses in a system's defense that allows the active errors to breach those defenses and cause harm. So we see harm coming to patients and individuals when active errors, such as reading the wrong chart, interacts with latent errors, maybe nobody followed up on that and signed off on it as a quality check, combine. So breaches of a system's defense and rule-compliant failures are often one and the same. And in these settings, in these contexts, employees and professionals consistently and brazenly disregard the rules on standards of care. This is shocking. The article that this comes from will be included in our course readings this term, and it's very, very interesting and also very, very scary. One-time deviations from standard procedures become normalized and lead to possibilities or deviations that become routine. So maybe you're supposed to come in and the procedure is supposed to be A, B, C. Well, somebody that's might be doing this job for a while, well, I don't really see the need for step B, so I'm just going to go A, C. And now, everyone starts to do A, C instead of A, B, C. But the procedure and the protocol is A, B, C, and say if something happened and you go back and check and everyone says, well, who does step B? And everyone says, no, not us. Well, that's where we have huge problems. So what are some common deviant behaviors in healthcare? Common rule-breaking hospitals. This is an article that looks at the US, or a US example, but let's not kid ourselves here. This happens in Canada as well. So, common rule-breaking practices in the hospital settings. Not washing your hands. Why would somebody, a nurse, or a doctor, or a personal support worker, or an orderly, anyone in the hospital, why would they not wash their hands after interacting with somebody? Yep. Okay, it dries out your hands. What was this one?
You're too busy.
Too busy.
Too many patients.
Too many patients. Okay, so time has been documented as an excuse. Why else wouldn't we wash our hands when we know it's proper standard of care? Yep. Sure. So that would be an example of trying to correct this active error of not washing your hands by putting in the hand sanitizer pumps in every single room in every single hallway. Yeah. Could be tired. Could just forget. Yep. Think they don't need to? Yeah, because maybe they didn't physically touch that person, but they were in the same, right next same vicinity of that person as well. So common rule breaking practice number one, not washing your hands. Aside from not washing your hands, the one that scares me the most is not changing your gloves. That's gross. In the healthcare setting. Think about a nurse or an orderly that comes in and maybe does the personal care for a patient, self-care, maybe bathing. Then they finish up and then they go right over to the next room with the same gloves on. What would that do? What's going to become of that? What's that going to cause? Contamination, spread, these types of things. How much time does it take to take off a pair of latex gloves and put a pair back on? So, just thinking about some of these things. Failing to check the armbands of patients. Another common rule-breaking practice. Scary. This is how we have people sitting in waiting rooms or emergency rooms in distress, or people not getting the care or the medication, or being in the right place at the right time where they need to be, maybe for an x-ray or an MRI or whatever. These types of things. Not performing security checks. Not getting required approval before acting. That's a huge one. If you're a nurse, put yourself in the shoes of a nurse, and you have a patient that is demanding that they are in so much pain, yet they've already had their limit of painkillers for the day. And you know you could help them, but you're kind of not allowed, or you need approval to give another dose. But the doctor's not around. Maybe they're in surgery or on their rounds in another wing of the hospital. What would you do? What would you do? Just think about that for a second. Any thoughts? Yep. Pardon me? Check if their pain is genuine. How would you determine if their pain is genuine? Okay, but as the nurse or the person administering the medication, is that your call? No. So it's a great point, and this is the thought patterns that go through some of these situations and why protocols get broken. And these are things we want to start thinking about. Bigger picture. So a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Violating policies on storing or dispensing medications. You know, I've seen some situations where there's just bottles of medication just sitting out. Certain storing practices that need to be kept. Maybe certain medications need to be kept in a locked vicinity. Shouldn't just be sitting out on a counter. These types of things. So these are some common rule-breaking practices. There are others, but from this article and from the research literature reviews that they performed, these seem to be the top rule-breaking practices in the hospital setting. So just think about it. You know, if you've been in the hospital or you visited in the hospital, somebody, you know, or next time you are in there, take a look around. See what's going on. See how the employees are behaving. Are they, you know, doing the things that they're supposed to be doing? So it can be quite interesting. So, mentioned on the 2 slides ago, the normalization of certain practices. Practices that are against the rules now all of a sudden are becoming normal. So, the normalization of these deviant practices in healthcare, HC, I just shortened it for healthcare, does not appear substantially different from practices in private businesses. So, comparing it to another context, laundering money, tax evasion, whatever. So the normalization of the deviant practice, no matter what it is, all of a sudden it's normal. This is just what we do now. But in healthcare, deviance is virtually never performed with criminal or malicious intent. Now, there is a caveat to that. There was a nurse, in Woodbridge? No, where was it? Yes, that she was found guilty of actually murdering 8 elderly patients, so criminal intent. Pardon me?
8 babies.
And 8 babies? Oh, wow. So, pardon me?
A nurse was caught for murdering babies in England.
There it is. That's the one. The nurse was caught for murdering babies in England? Yeah. Thank you. So, we say virtually never performed with criminal intent. Obviously, there always are exceptions to the norm. Those are a couple of examples. There are evil people out there that do these types of things when they're in positions of power or have the ability to. And also, health professionals typically justify deviations as necessary. So we've kind of mentioned a couple. Time. Maybe my patient needed something and nobody was around, so I did it. I did it for the good of my patient. If I was in that situation, I want somebody to do that for me. Those types of things. So there's the justification that the break-in protocol was necessary. No, those protocols are put there for a reason. Carefully designed for a reason. Yet, in these settings, people brazenly break them and then justify it as what should be done. But they are not in a position or decide, they're not the decision makers on that. Their job is to follow that. And it seems sometimes, just human beings in general, we have a hard time just following the rules. Who jaywalks? There. Case in point, right there. Yeah. How do you justify that? Saves time, right? Oh, there's nobody there. Still, is jaywalking against the law? There we are. So, what are some factors that contribute to the normalization of deviance in healthcare? Well, the most common excuse or reason is that the rules are stupid and inefficient. Most common defense, that rule's stupid. Again, is it your job to create and develop these protocols? No, it's your job to follow them. So you should follow them. That's what you get paid for. That's what your job description indicates. So it's stupid and inefficient. The rules are stupid and inefficient. Why are we doing that? That's stupid. I don't do it that way. Think about this. Think about if you were in a role for 30 to 35 years, and you've done this, like whatever behavior, whatever the protocol was, the same way for 30 years. Then changes come down the pipe through legislation that change some certain protocols. Add in another step, maybe another safety measure. But I've been here 30 years. I'm going to continue to do the things the way that I've always done them. Screw the new rules, because it works for me. That's the mindset that comes in, and the factors that contribute to normalization of deviance. Knowledge is imperfect and uneven. Sometimes knowledge, information, does not get transmitted in the same way all the time. There's varying degrees of understanding. The work and new technology can disrupt work behaviors. So again, new procedures, new technology, new scheduling systems. You know, technology is supposed to make our lives easier, and it does eventually, but there's always that initial learning curve that we get frustrated with, especially if we've done something the same way for the past 10 years. It can be difficult, frustrating, overwhelming. So that's where proper training and time to integrate certain things, new technologies, in a scaffolded manner can be very efficient. Number 4, I'm breaking the rule for the good of my patient. We kind of mentioned that with the pain example. And that's very common. Well, I did this because my patient needed it. It was the good of my patient. And that's the justification. I feel morally justified in breaking the rules because I was able to provide relief or provide something that's outside of normal protocol for my patients. The rules don't apply to me. You can trust me, I know what I'm doing. If anyone says, you can trust me, I know what I'm doing, just pump the brakes a little bit. So the rules don't apply to me. Again, back to our jaywalking example, or our online streaming example. Sometimes workers are afraid to speak up because they might get reprimanded going against the course or the dominant course of action or the dominant ideologies or the dominant way of thinking in those certain contexts. And sometimes leadership withholds information or dilutes findings on system problems. So maybe they don't report them as frequently so it doesn't look like there's an issue. They don't want their yearly reports, or whoever's looking at their board of directors, to see, oh, we might have a problem here. No, everything's tickety-boo. Everything's working great. So fudge the numbers here and there. So I want to try and connect something here. Who watches Suits? Who watches Grey's Anatomy? Who watches, well, let's see, The Wire, cop shows, you know? Every single episode, there is somebody brazenly breaking the rules and heroically saves the day. Hollywood sensationalizes this stuff to make it think that we can go ahead and just make those decisions when we're not either qualified or have the authority to do so. So we have to keep in mind. So when I watch some of those shows, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, something's not quite right here. You know? So again, and you can see some of these, you know, think of Grey's or think of House, the show House. That guy was breaking the rules all the time. Yet he always had a very good reason. And usually it was because I'm smarter than you. So think about that when you're watching some of your shows. All right, so how how do we try to stop some of these normal deviant behaviors in our healthcare settings? And some of you, like you put up your hand, you want to be doctors, you want to be in these types of roles, in these types of situations. You know, when rubber hits the road and you're actually in it, what are you going to do? How are you going to behave? Are you going to behave ethically and morally and follow the protocols? Or are you going to go against that? How are you going to justify your behaviors? So, some fundamental commitment to patient safety. Obviously paying attention to the weak signals. Maybe there are certain people that just aren't good at their job and should not be doing it. Or don't have the required skills or the knowledge and just aren't safe to work with. So we got to pay attention to those weak signals. Maybe there's weak signals in the way there's certain things are being reported. We need to be able to resist the urge to be unreasonably optimistic about how good things are in the hospitals or in these settings. Oh, everything worked out fine. Not a big deal. Everything's great. We need to be constantly analyzing, critiquing why we're doing certain things. Is it working? Getting feedback from various stakeholders, workers, patients, every level, every stakeholder group. Teach employees how to conduct emotionally uncomfortable conversations. A lot of times we back down or we don't want to be in a confrontation. A lot of us don't like confrontation. Most of us don't like confrontation. And when we find ourselves in those situations, we want to get out of them as quickly as possible, so we'll do whatever just to alleviate that uncomfortableness. System operators need to feel safe in speaking up and identifying certain weaknesses and not be chastised or bullied to cover things up. And realize that oversight and monitoring for rule compliance is a never-ending process. Just because we have this elaborate, wonderful protocol, okay, check that box, it's done, everything's going to work perfectly. No, because there's always human error. Anytime we have to rely on, and sometimes it's, brazenly there, sometimes it's a mistake. But rule compliance and monitoring is always an ongoing thing. Safety, health, and safety awareness, always an ongoing thing.